as they spin deeper and deeper and deeper into this evil world of Karl Marx. His vision, like I said, was not one of economic benefit to anybody. If it was, he would have had a solution once he got to the end of their communistic utopia. No, economics was just the vessel to remove God from society, because then he could feel good about himself and the dirt that he wished that he could go back to. But we're divided on race, on economics, on liberty, our nation. We're all divided. And all of these divisions, they're ginned up by the notion that there is no God. There is no salvation. It doesn't matter if you do anything about it. You could be as non-racist as you want to be, but unless you're an anti-racist, you're still a racist. As long as the color of your skin isn't that color, then you are still a racist, whether you like it or not. There is no salvation. And again, I urge you to think about what a child must feel like when they begin to become an adult. What it must feel like to find out you're not God. So what must we do to break the chains of this Marxism, of the visions of Karl Marx, his hatred and his evil? We'll see the cause of this bloodshed, the cause of this divisiveness, the cause of all of that's an easy one to spot if you know what to look for, but the solution is far more difficult. You see, the tentacles of Karl Marx's hatred has been able to permeate not just our churches, not our government, but our sports, our social lives, what people call justice, this social justice. These aren't new terms. He was talking about social justice in the 1830s. It's all a distraction. But I urge you, the only solution to this is to take up your charge, which is to root out this evil of Marxism that is here. And if we don't do anything, it will be here to stay. It will dissolve this great nation. Your liberty will all go away. If we squabble over gun control this or mental health that. No, how do you root it out? If you're a person that goes to church, if you're a member of a church, if you believe in God, and you go to church, then you need to take up your charge. Be looking for the Marxist ideals that will be running through most of the churches here today. These churches that don't teach any doctrine, that don't teach salvation, that don't teach humility, the fallibility of mankind, the ones that don't teach redemption. Look for the causes that they're involved in. Look for the money. Where does the money from those churches, where do they donate? And if they donate to any cause that might espouse itself to anything that compares itself to Marxism, then you need to publicly call it out and leave. If you're a Christian that doesn't necessarily go to church on a regular basis, then I suggest that you take your faith public. You may not have to go to church. It's recommended. But the world needs to know where you stand when it comes to faith. When it comes to your government, the infiltration in your government, then you need to primary every single member of whatever political party you espouse to, if they share any of the ideals of Karl Marx. If they overlook it, if they dress it up, or if that's just part of it, or this is how it goes. This is part of doing business. Anything that diminishes the value of the individual for the greater good. They need to be primaried. They need to be called as they are, which are heretics. They need to be run out of our government, and we need to be open to letting God back into our government. You see, there is a separation of church and state, but there is not a separation of God and state, not in the eyes of our founders and not in our Constitution. So if your church isn't willing to call out their elected officials for what they are, and it is time to call the devil for what the devil is. It is time for your pastors, your clergies, your Sunday school teachers, because Karl Marx is alive and well. He is here. He is roaming the halls of your school. He's roaming your nurseries. He's roaming your libraries. He is roaming up and down every single pew in every single congregation here in the United States of America. It is Karl Marx. He is alive and well today. And our clergy sits on their hands behind their 501c3s. And what do? They say, I can't get into politics. We would lose our tax exemption. Guess where that tax exemption came from? It came from Lyndon Johnson, that separated the ability of churches to speak to politics. It granted them a tax exemption, but it was Lyndon Johnson himself that knew that if he could control the churches financially. So if your pastor is too big of a coward to call out his elected officials, your elected officials, he is supposed to be watching after his flock. That is what God commanded him to do. And if he doesn't have the guts to do it, then you find a minister that will. But until then, you call it out. Now, if you're a parent and you have children in school, this is an area that I failed at. You need to be involved in your school board meetings if you have no other choice, and put them in this indoctrination camp. You need to be at every school board meeting. And I want to tell you how dangerous it is to be a parent who calls out the curriculum in our school board meetings today. Our Department of Justice has decided to use the FBI to start treating parents that are concerned about the critical race theory. They're concerned about the transgender bathroom issue. They are treating parents as if they are domestic terrorists. They're using the full weight of the government to protect their indoctrination. So if you're a parent that is unfortunate enough to have to put your children through public school, then you be insistent that you see the text. You see the libraries. Because Karl Marx is a predator. He is climbing every single library school bookshelf. He's sitting next to your child in class. He's sitting behind the teacher's desk. If you have a child in private school, then I'd be equally as concerned, because Karl Marx is behind all forms of our modern education theory in the name of social justice, in the name of common good. Be wary of your church. Be wary of the Christian schools, the private schools, the charter schools. Be on the lookout. You see, it's time for society to finally say that they've had enough. It is time for society to finally say, get behind me, Satan. Our nation is in desperate need of a revival. Satan has used this vessel of Karl Marx since 1848 to destroy you, to lead you away from God's face. He does it in the name of greater good. So again, in light of what happened last week, in the weeks before, I ask you, what greater good has been served for our children here in America today, based on the teachings of the man named Karl Marx? I encourage you to look into it. I encourage you to take the time to study, to learn who Karl Marx was, what his ideals were, what his vision was, how poisonous this utopia that he promised has been to the world. Hundreds of millions dead and starved based on this atheistic ideal. this godless ideal. And we stand here today and we demand that we take God out of our schools. And then we act shocked when the children behave so godlessly. It is our fault. But there is hope. There is a chance at redemption, which is not something that Marx ever offered. See, there is forgiveness. There is redemption in Christ. Seek his face. Seek what is just. Seek what our founders sought. Take up the mantle of responsibility. Regain your faith. Regain your footing as a parent. Stand up and say that this cannot continue. This has to end, this cycle, this endless cycle of evil. The bloodshed will end. We can grow, we can overcome this, but not if we're going to continue down the path that Karl Marx set us on so many years ago. I pray that you took some of this to heart. I hope I didn't ramble too much. Maybe next week we can dig into something lighter. But until then, always remember, there is hope. There is redemption. And we can do this together as long as we follow Christ, his word, his redemption. And forget the notion of the evil of Karl Marx.